Welcome to the Samson Strength Coach Collective. On today's episode, we have Travis Barrett. Travis is currently a strength coach within the United States Air Force. It was a really enjoyable conversation with me and Travis. I hope he enjoyed it. But I really like to hear about his thought process. You can tell he's a high level thinker. And then to hear about his experience kind of within different populations and developing ways to get the athletes he works with or the individuals he works with to buy in, which was super interesting and kind of inspired my ideas about coaching a little bit. So I hope that does the same for you. As always, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. Hello, collective listeners. On today's episode, we have Travis Barrett joining us. Travis, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me today.
Absolutely. Travis has already been emotional support for me. We've had transfer portal issues going down. So I just got to vent to him right before we got on the episode. So I'm excited to speak with him and actually hear about him because I started talking about myself immediately. So thank you for the support. And then, could you kind of just start it off, give us an intro to you, kind of your background in strength and conditioning, and then what you do currently?
Yeah, so when I got started in strength and conditioning, it would have been when I was an undergraduate at Ball State University under Coach Jason Roberson, who's still there as the director. And after that, went to Indiana University and got my graduate degree in applied sports science. Then got into the collegiate sector for a few years, then was a private sector. And now I've been at Fairchild Air Force Base as the head strength coach for the Steer Schoolhouse for going on 4 years now, and starting here in a month or two, going back to school to get my PhD in exercise science from University of Idaho.
I mean, wow, I love the career path. I'm really excited to kind of dive into the difference between a lot of the things that, in a lot of professions that you chose within the field of strength and conditioning itself. First off, Ball State, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like Ball State is a very well known strength and conditioning program. Like when I meet good
Yeah,
strength coaches, usually they come from Ball State. How was your experience there?
yeah. It's when I first heard that, I thought they were just feeding us a load of crap. I thought it was something they just said to get us excited and keep us there. But no, it's the real deal. I mean, um, let's see. You look at the Trappy brothers doing a bunch of research for NASA. You look at obviously the beast right now is Dr. Andy Galpin, who got his PhD from Ball State. So when he was doing his PhD, I was doing my undergraduate, so I got to see him pretty frequently for my 3 years. He'd be up in the lab, come down to the weight room. I'd see him quite a bit. So there's him, another guy named Mike Lawrence, who's University of New England, master's in biomechanics. Got Matt Winning. I mean, just the list goes on. And I don't know. I think it's just because there's nothing to do in Indiana, so everybody studies their ass off and dives in and gets really good at what they do.
That's awesome. I mean, but the coolest piece has got to be able to have these resources and well-known people
Mm-hmm.
within the field, not even from a popularity standpoint, right? But people who are doing specific research and, something like NASA research is going to be similar to, I'm sure, what you do within the Air Force. And so it's got to be cool to actually be able to reach out to your fellow classmates and kind of continue to connect with them. Have you kind of maintained that network a little bit with some of your classmates?
Yeah, I mean, not so many of my classmates I graduated with or anything like that. There may be one or two that I stay in touch with, but I was just on the phone with Coach Roberson the other day, um, you know, running some ideas by him and had some questions. It's That's what's so cool about strength and conditioning field is people, the majority of people are always willing and able to help and happy to answer questions and make the next generation better than they were. So it's been very rare that I've ran into people who are not willing to open up or share or anything like that.
I mean, that's what I love about the field. I mean, 100%, because I have coaches kind of reach out to me and I'll talk with them about anything, and they're like, hey, what about like you're giving me trade secrets here or anything. I'm like, I promise you with what I'm
There's
doing, there's
nothing.
zero secrets. Just go pick up periodization by Bumpa. And that's me. Okay. It's
Mm-hmm.
as simple as it gets, and so it's fun to actually share, but then you can learn from other coaches as you kind of go about that process as well too. Even coaches for me who, um, maybe reach out. It's like their first year coaching. I've learned stuff from them as well because everybody has such a varied background. Ball State's a fantastic program, but then you've got places like ETSU, that everybody comes from.
Mm-hmm.
It's all these super famous schools, and then I've got myself and Nick LaRue holding it down from Temple University in my class, and that's that's really it on our end. And Nick's a better representative of the program than I certainly am. But I love that piece about strength and conditioning for sure.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I was just gonna say, there's I did my graduate assistantship at University of Wisconsin La Crosse, and I ran into Tim Sukumel, who's now Dr. Tim Sukumel, and he went to ETSU, and Tim was awesome. He was able to introduce me to Dr. Chris Tabor, and just all these guys. And it seems in our world like there's so many, but then you realize it's really pretty small. So any question you have, you can start to branch out and just. I've emailed a ton of people and just said like, hey, I'm having this problem. Can you help me with it, or maybe point me in the direction of somebody who can? 9 times out of 10, they're like, absolutely, let's talk about it.
I mean, that's what makes it so cool for me from the whole idea that everybody, if you think of strength and conditioning, like you think of Mike Boyle, when I first started coming up, it was like, this man's untouchable. I'll never be able to speak to him in my life, and then you can get
Mm-hmm.
put in contact with him. It's like almost like it's strength and conditioning, like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon,
Oh yeah,
like everybody, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's like the 2 degrees of any professional within strength and conditioning. You ask somebody, and they probably know somebody who knows them.
Oh yeah.
But again, it's a good focus point, and it allows us to come up with some really good ideas. And ultimately, I'm sure why you're in it as well too is it's for the people we work with and our clients and in the
Mm-hmm.
private sector, or athletes in the collegiate realm, or people in the tactical realm. It's all about helping them out as much as possible. So why wouldn't we want to help each other?
Exactly.
Unless other Sunbelt coaches call, because there's some really good ones in my league, and I worry about helping them at all so that we don't. I don't want to lose. I hate losing. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, your initial kind of years in the collegiate sector, how was your experience there? I've obviously you've transitioned out of it. So what kind of inspired that transition to then go private sector? Can you just break that down for me a little bit?
Yeah. So when I was at Ball State, I was, interning with Coach Robe for a couple of years, and then was intern with Indiana Pacers. But then my first job out of school, I was the head strength coach at a very small school that I'm sure no one's ever heard of, but it's called Haskell Indian Nations University, and it's an all Native American school and an AIA school. It's in Lawrence, Kansas, and I was the director there for 2 years, and it was just a 2 year contract, and then that was that. They got a new school president, and she didn't believe in collegiate athletics the way everybody else did, so she didn't see a reason to keep me around or whatever. So, but that was probably one of the best jobs for me that I could have had, because here I go in as a Caucasian dude to an all native school, and I've got to learn how to build rapport very very quickly with uh, people that rightfully so have are going to be a little standoffish, right? So I have to go in, and I'm in charge of 12 sports. How do I build relationships with these uh, athletes and get them to buy in and listen to what I have to say, and get them to truly understand that I'm there for their best interest as far as strength and conditioning? I'm not there to do anything except help them optimize their performance. So that was the collegiate sector for me. But
I mean,
the yeah, go
go
ahead,
ahead.
go ahead.
Well, this is like
Um,
drinking water from a fire hose, man. I mean, that's insane.
yeah, so it was and the reason I had reached out because I knew the contract was coming to an end, and I applied and applied and applied to the college sector. But you know, I know people will argue this and say like, no, that's not how it is. We actually review the resumes and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's people who know people who know people, and they hook their boy up, and they're like, yeah, man, we totally went through all these resumes. Okay, great. Well, there's that. Plus, there's like 500 to 1,000 applicants for an assistant job or whatever. And if you don't want to do it, and you don't want to be working 14 to 16 hours a day, cool. Well, we got another one coming through. So after I'd sent out my resume and applied to however many places, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go in the private sector for a little bit, do some personal training and sport performance stuff in the private sector, and a friend and I ended up opening our own sport performance business in Lawrence, and it's still there and it's still crushing it. It's called Evolution Athletics, and it's the number one sport performance spot in Lawrence by a long shot. Like it's not even close. Um, but then I had the opportunity to go from there to Fairchild, and um, I just couldn't pass that up. So I had to sell my shares to my business partner, and he's still doing great, still crushing it.
Well, I mean, what you talk about for the job application process, like I have an intern here with me. He's doing a fantastic job. He's really eager to be in the field, and so, with anybody who interns with me and is really showing a lot of interest, I kind of try to make sure I explain a lot of the things that aren't necessarily shown within the school, or you find out about, just kind of without undertaking the internship process and talking with strength coaches. And so he came in and he was like, "Hey man, did you see LSU men's basketball just opened up? Like, are you going to apply?" And I was like, "All right, dude, sit down. Like, we're going to have a little bit of a talk here and explain
Yep.
how that process is going to be difficult." And that level or that barrier, certainly can make it frustrating. And I think what I respect about your journey is that you found a way to still make it work and stay within the field. It's something where I know of some other coaches who have had a pretty similar process where they're director of a school as kind of their first job, which is stressful enough, and then add in your extra challenges that you had of trying to relate to the athletes. I mean, that makes it tenfold more stressful. And unfortunately, when they don't necessarily have the connections to get that next job, they kind of end up choosing a different career path. And you see
Mm-hmm.
people who were very passionate about the field end up taking a different route, which is frustrating. So, I mean, I kudos to you to continue on and find a way.
Well, like I can't take full credit for that because I was just talking to my wife the other day. There's certainly times where I've applied for, and this is not new or anything different than you've heard from any other strength coach, but I applied for, shoot, I don't know how many pharmaceutical sales jobs or medical device sales jobs or something similar. And for whatever reason, those doors just kept getting shut. And it's like, all right, well, for some reason, I just keep like, I'm staying the course here. But now I look back and I'm like, wow, man, this is went on pretty quick. Because rewind 10 years ago and you know made a ton of progress in 10 years time. But at the time, it's hard to grind through the day in, day out, the week in, week out. And there must be a reason that I'm still in strength conditioning. There must be a reason that those other doors that I thought were closing for the wrong reasons probably closed for the right reasons to keep me here. So
I mean, I agree 100%. And that's where, certain things or certain opportunities will kind of present themselves. If it doesn't feel right to me, I kind of just
mm-hmm.
trust my gut on those situations.
Yep.
I was at Texas Tech, and it was gonna cost me a lot of money to move to App State, and I was gonna make the same salary, and then now we had state tax, so technically I'm making less from
Yeah.
Texas. And I just remember sitting with my fiance, and I'm just like, I just feel like I have to make this move. Like there's just something that is kind of drawing me to it, and luckily is one of the best decisions I ever made. And it's funny you say like those doors that are closed. There's a lot of times where I'll be like interested in a position or kind of look at it and say, "Oh, that might be a really nice spot." And then you come out a year later, the coach gets fired, and it's this
Mm-hmm.
whole wreck of a situation. It's like, wow, I'm really fortunate to kind of follow the path that I continue on. And then obviously your path has led you to different avenues. You know, in your current experience now, how does that differ from the private sector? Can you kind of just take me through like a typical day working in the Air Force?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is these guys are required to PT. The private sector, that people have to make the decision. They either have to be proactive or they have to be in enough pain to make the decision that they need to invest in their health. And so it's more of a you eat what you kill kind of thing in the private sector. So the opportunity to make a lot of money is there, but at the same time, the opportunity to not do so hot. Like you gotta figure that out too. Like what are you gonna do? So there's not the pressure of the sales. There's not the pressure of the overhead with the tactical setting. The guys have to show up, and it's been a 4-year process of trying to get the culture shifted and changed the way I want it. And it's taken time. You can't go in. I mean, especially with the steer population, they are highly competitive. They technically fall under special warfare. So you have a lot of type A personalities who have traditionally done X, Y, Z for these, and it's worked fine according to them. But then you just start introducing different concepts and reasons, rationale for why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that culture shift has just taken time. So now they understand where I'm coming from, and we've seen injury rates continue to decrease. I'm not doing anything magical or special. It's no original thought. It's just what I think a reasonable strength coach would do. Um, but because we're managing fatigue and we're managing volumes appropriately, we've seen injury rates decrease. So typical day will be, team. There's team and there's pre-team. So team has a 6-month pipeline. So team goes out on all these different phases. They're back on base, they're back off base, on base, and so on. So when they're back on base, a lot of the time we're doing restoration type workouts. We're trying to recover some of the fatigue they've accumulated. So it's a little bit different versus the pre-team folks where it's Monday through Friday, and we can go through different phases of training, but it also depends on when they get up here. Because currently teams only start twice per year. So teams start in January and July. So because of that, I mean, if you get here in August, well, that's actually a good thing because now we have a long time to develop someone. But if they get here in June and they're set to start in July, that's not much time at all because they have to make it through prerequisites. They have to do all this stuff before they can even start their team. So if they're getting here in June, they're starting in July, I may only see them twice, so, and then the age range is another big factor. So I've seen as young as 17 because their parents signed off on them to join the military and they made it through the BMT stuff. And then they're up here. I've seen 17-year-olds and I've seen as old as, I think we have a guy right now who's 41. So that's where I have to communicate to the administration, like, hey, biological age and training age are not synonymous. We have to understand that. We have to look at their injury history. We need to look at their ortho screen. We need to do all these things before we can just say, go PT. So that's kind of the challenges and how in days, what they look like. They're undulating. They move through, we have high days and low days, and we have restoration days and things like that. But as far as resources and budget, like we have it's not POTUS money. So for tactical population, especially ones that are out like like dealing with Navy SEALs and Green Berets and stuff, they have access to POTUS funds. We don't have POTUS fund money, so we got to be pretty smart with what we do. But we, invest a lot in the recovery aspect because we tell them all the time, yes, it's hard to train hard, but it's even harder to, do the recovery because nobody wants to do the stuff that's not sexy. So,
I mean,
that's kind of the day to day.
absolutely. Like I'm dealing with it right now from a standpoint of both our men's and women's team just came off a long, basketball seasons are 6 months long, like if you're counting the October practices, which are technically the hardest in my opinion, because you're playing basketball for 3 hours a day. And I'm struggling having conversations with them right now about that exact process of, we're coming in, we're doing GPP work. It might be a 30-minute workout and they're out of the door and they're kind of like, it's off season. We should be hitting it as hard as possible. And it's about, no, it's really about more rebuilding our ability to be within the weight room. How do you approach those conversations, especially with the type A people that you speak about?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the biggest one is, historically you'd go into your PT session and it would be whatever cadre was, running the show for the day, and it was just random. So I would start when I first got there. I took notes for like a month, and I didn't really say anything. I just observed, and then like, all right, here's some things that I noticed, and it was completely random. So it was random training yields random results. So I would talk about that and start introducing that concept and planting that seed. And then the other thing that, like, two things. Number one, I started talking to these guys about dread. So don't redline every day. So, and then within that, Anatoly Bondarchuk and Vladimir Shurin talk about points, how many points each session is worth, whether it's a 1 to a 5 pointer. So I would say, okay, well, I'm going to give you guys a budget that you can use, and the budget is 15 points within a week. And you may not have 2 5-point days back to back. So that allowed them to still have some ownership over that, but also start to see like, hey, here's the reason rationale. Like it's just the way physiology works, right? Like you have to allow for rest and recovery. So if you guys want them to do this, but you're not allowing any recovery, it's literally an unreasonable task. So it just was a lot of those conversations, a lot of me shaking hands and just having one-on-one conversations, listening first, and then just, hey, can I give you 2 cents of my thoughts real quick?
Yeah. Hey, and I love that point system because I feel like as type A people, it's very easy. Like you said, you want ownership of what you're doing. You want to have a little bit of that freedom, and that autonomy of your workouts. But then at the same time, it's like for me, I love having set systems and set checks on things. Like, I'm a track my calories type person because I like to see the exact data behind it, not because I'm worried about how many calories is in a slice of cheesecake or whatever. It's much more behind about for me about having set data and set values for me to actually go about my process. I'm sure it's the same for the people that you work with. But now you've spoken about two kind of culture shifts that you've had to
Mm-hmm.
deal with. The first being your time initially at the NAIA school, and then now here. What are kind of the key things that you look for in being able to kind of change those cultures? In one being a little bit more relation. Well, I guess they're both relationship based. I don't want to say
Yeah.
that. So what were kind of your key points in both of those situations, trying to change those cultures?
Yeah. I mean, part of it's probably just the luck of the draw as far as where I was born. Just a Midwest upbringing. It's a lot of blue collar humbleness, humility, almost probably you could say to a fault. But uh, and then it's just meeting people where they're at. Like you're not trying to go in and show people how smart you are and all that stuff because it really does go back to that saying of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So like my my sometimes my passion gets mistaken for frustration because I care and I don't want to see people get hurt. I want to see people optimize their performance because there's tons of low hanging fruit that they can grab that they don't even realize is right in front of their face. So, a lot of it is just KLT, know, like, and trust. So just going in, introducing myself, and just building those relationships, and then like I don't think I'm unique in this regard. I think a lot of strength coaches have this, where I could probably ask you about all your basketball players, and you could probably tell me where they're from, what their favorite what their favorite food is. You could tell me all sorts of unique things about them, and just knowing and remembering those things and asking them those things, they go, "Oh my gosh, this guy actually remembers this. He must care." So like some of my guys that are on pre-team right now, it's not just that I know their injuries, but I know where they're from. I know what's going on in some of their personal lives. I know this and I know that. And then I check on them daily. I'm like, hey man, how's that going? And I might be the only one doing that. I don't know. But not strength coach wise. I'm just talking
Yeah.
like on base. But so I think that's where a lot of it comes from is they know that I know these things, and we haven't even talked training. They could care less about the periodization stuff or programming or whatever. It's more of like if they know that I care about them, then they know I have their best interest at heart. They're going to be more willing to work hard.
I mean, absolutely. And that's exactly what you mentioned. I do think a lot of strength coaches kind of break it down from that standpoint. But I do also think it speaks to you as a person and also a little bit of your dedication to stick with it, right? Because a
Okay.
trend I've noticed within college athletics, especially with the transfer portal kind of coming up, is well, if this person and I aren't seeing eye to eye and I kind of get to know them a little bit and I try to bring those things up and that relationship is hard and it's taking a lot of time to develop. I've seen some coaches and heard some language from other coaches. It's like, well, hopefully they just hit the transfer portal this next year, and then we can just develop with somebody new, And so it's not necessarily the case that you're dealing with, right? But I think it's hard to go about that process every single day, especially
Yes.
knowing that things could change at any given moment. I think that speaks to what you're developing there. Over the 4 years, have you seen a gradual change? Was it really kind of the biggest change was from year one to year two? What are the things that you are still kind of looking to improve as you continue down this process?
Yeah. So it's been very gradual, but it's all been good. It's been, you know, me doing extra things that I don't need to do that are not within my job description or requirement. Like I would go to different flights and present about basic strength conditioning stuff. This month I've done, I don't know, 4 Zoom calls to a group of master sergeants down in Alabama. Well, there's 20 master sergeants that are attending this course, and only one that I actually know, but he asked me to do this. So anyway, like I know that guy knows somebody, but that's not why I did it. It was more because I, want to leave a good impression so that people have a good relationship with other HPO staff, like human performance optimization or strength coaches, whatever. And the biggest challenge though is you have admin who PCS every 2 to 3 years, kind of depending. So it's just having those conversations with them, talking to them about what you're doing. They don't care about the mechanics. They just want to know, like, why are you doing this? And then, well, I'm doing this because I believe it'll help stabilize their knee. And if it helps stabilize their knee, then the likelihood of them getting injured and, being out and missing time from work. And then now we're talking at minimum $50,000 for a knee repair and PT work and whatever else goes with that. Well, if I can save one knee, like, that's good, right? So, just explaining those things and having a lot of sit downs and cups of coffee with people and trying to get them to understand where I'm coming from. And I try to do a good job of listening and understand where they're coming from. So, the worst though is when somebody goes to PCS and they know they're going to PCS and they're like, "Hey, I need to get in really good shape for this unit that I'm going to. Can you help me with it?" And they're like 12 weeks out. Like, yeah, sure. So we go through some stuff, and they notice dramatic progress because they've been doing their own thing the whole time. And then for the next 12 weeks, they do exactly what I say. And then, crazy that like they have some like great progress. And the worst part is they go, "Man, I wish I would have listened to you sooner."
Yeah.
Like, dude, like that does not feel good.
No.
I wish you would have listened 2 years ago, because we could be further along. But yeah, so
But that change has still been made, and
yeah,
it's frustrating for sure. Like, and especially, my fiance being a dietitian, it's a lot of me talking to them about what they're eating as well too, because she doesn't get to have that
mm,
kind of one-on-one time or FaceTime with him as much as I do. And so I'll never forget there was one player in particular, like he's like he in the middle of the game was like, "Hey, CA, like you need to help me with my conditioning." And it's like January. I'm like, dude, there's nothing like, first of all, there's nothing we can do right now. And then we asked about, kind of like, what are you eating? How are your game day kind of preps going into it? And then he's like, well, I kind of eat like a sandwich in the mornings and then at 7 o'clock. I don't like pregame meals, so I don't eat it. And I'm like, oh my God. And so he ate for the first time and he's like, oh my, he had like, I think he had like
yeah,
15 points, 10 rebounds. He's like, this is the best game I ever had. And I was like, it's magical.
yeah. Yesterday we were outside on Echo bikes and we were doing 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off, repeat 10 rounds. And then we would have a 5-minute recovery period and then we did 3 cycles. And I told him, I was like, this is what it's going to be. Like, I promise you guys, you'll want to have, an intro workout shake on this one. Like, it doesn't need to be like heavy milk based stuff, but you will want some carbs and some electrolytes and all this stuff. But anyways, a sunny day yesterday, and they had their bottles all lined up, and they all have these blue Nalgene bottles. And this is like the first time that I've looked and I saw all different colors in the Nalgene bottles. So I'm seeing like, all right, cool. These guys are actually listening. Like they've got some Gatorade or Powerade or All Sport. Does anybody make All Sport anymore? But they have like some salt in there, and like they're actually listening and doing these things. And they made it through a better Echo Bike workout than previous. And I'm like, all right, cool. Something is taking hold. These guys are actually But that's like the little stuff that the admin doesn't see, the cadre they don't know to look for that stuff unless I tell them to look for that stuff, you know. But for me, it's like, all right, cool, this is working.
And it's a much better quality session, and then it's much better
Mm-hmm.
overall for your enjoyment of a daily process as well too, because it's no fun. I've worked with teams in the past where it's really a struggle to be able to kind of have those conversations and see growth with the team, and like sometimes it's a drag. You're walking in, you're just like, man, like it's just gonna be a tough workout, because I know this group's not really gonna listen to me. But then you do kind of have some small breakthrough moments or some situations where you can see that at least something is rubbing off and that they're seeing a little bit of improvement, and it makes it way better overall to come in for the session. And one piece too that you brought up that I think is really interesting, and I kind of don't think about really on a regular basis, but the interactions that your athletes have with you are going to affect how they see fitness or how they see working with other fitness professionals for the rest of their lives. And so you
Mm-hmm.
talk about somebody coming in and it's like, well, I wish I would have known this earlier, but because I saw this great progress over 12 weeks, but then potentially down the line, you're making it easier for somebody else who's going to work with them. And same process that we talked about with the transfer portal and new individuals coming in. If they had a bad relationship with the strength coach in the past, it's going to take me a couple more months to actually kind of build up a better relationship and get them to a point where they're happy to be within the weight room. So I think what you speak to as well about kind of making sure you have those positive interactions, but then admin can kind of hear feedback as well too. And it's a very, very gradual process, like you mentioned, but eventually one day you can kind of look around and see that things have really changed for the better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, you mentioned the PhD as well. That's
Mm-hmm.
something that I think if I told my mom I was going to go get my PhD, she'd cry tears of joy. She's a doctorate, and she's been begging me to do it, but it's a huge undertaking. What's kind of your inspiration behind that decision, and specifically why that PhD?
Yeah. So I remember, back at Evolution Athletics, uh, my business partner would train this older guy who he's just a cool older dude, and I remember him telling me, he's like, "Have you thought about going to school for your PhD?" I was like, "No, I think I'm done with school." And I was probably 28, 30 years old. I'm 37 now, and I was like, "No, I think I'm done. I don't want to go deal with it, all this stuff." And frankly, I just didn't know what I would pursue, like what's of interest enough to do a 3 to 5 year program. And anyway, my position here, I recently got converted to a GS position, which is great. And I started looking at some of the benefits, and I saw that they will pay up to 75% of continuing education. And okay, well, let me just look around a little bit. I'll just look. And I started hopping on the phone with a few guys at different, uh, you know, different institutions, and started looking at their routes and seeing what's what. And anyway, I talked to Dr. Josh Bailey at University of Idaho, and the big thing right now is like there's Washington State. They have an extension campus here. I don't think UW has anything that would be exactly what I want, but Washington State has like a nutrition and exercise physiology doctorate, if I remember right. But I'm not that interested in nutrition. All right, well, I guess it's just out of the wheelhouse here. And then when I talked to Dr. Bailey at UI, he's like, "Hey, well, what is it exactly you're wanting to do?" So I just started talking with him, and he's like, "We can make this thing kind of a hybrid where we do some stuff online. You'll have to come into the lab for some things, but we can make it work." I was like, okay. And it's looking like it'll be like a 3.5 year pursuit, and maybe 4, but we'll see. So what I'm gonna study or dive into is so my friend Dr. Chris Tabor is out at Sacred Heart University on the East Coast. I can't remember. I want to say Connecticut. I can't remember exactly. But anyway, he does a lot of stuff with eccentric loading, and then also with jump height analysis, and then using that to measure readiness. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And then I also like a lot of what Dr. Fry, who's at University of Kansas, does with the testosterone and cortisol ratios, with when doing the cheek swab. So I basically looked at what those guys were doing, and then I was curious. Okay, well, injury rate. Right now we have it where when someone gets injured, there's no way to know exactly what there's no way to predict injury at this point other than past injury. So what I'm going to pursue is like, all right, well, if I can do a cheek swab once per week and measure TC ratios and measure jump height daily, if somebody does get injured, I can mark that date and then go back and go and look at their TC ratios and their jump height and say like, all right, well, did we notice anything? When we noticed like, hey, was there testosterone suppression? Was there a cortisol elevation? Was their jump height negatively affected? And then is that an indicator at all with injury rates or not? And my thought is it doesn't matter if it's a junior high kid, high school, collegiate, pro, tactical. The more data that can live in this central database, the bigger that list gets, the more accurate it's going to become. So that's what I'm going to work on. There's a ton of stuff I still got to do, but that's essentially what I'm working on.
Well, what I love about that process, right, is it's something that advances the field, right? And we always talk about, and I tell recruits all the time, like injuries are going to happen. I can't tell you when it's going to happen, and they're part of the process. And I don't know if we'll ever get to a point where we can completely eliminate injuries.
Yeah.
It's just unrealistic to kind of think about it from that standpoint, but. To be able to look at a problem within the field and understand now how can I kind of approach it and maybe find some ways and some relevant data that can kind of help indicate injuries and maybe the tough part about it behind it, right, is you never know if you did prevent the injury from happening or not.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you can look over years, like you say, and continue to collect data and have more and more information, you could see, okay, since we've implemented this new process, injury rates have decreased as a whole. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very interesting because you're taking a problem that a lot of people say, as it's just kind of something where I think people kind of like throw their hands up and they're like, yeah, well, you don't really know what to do. So I'm just going to kind of roll with it as it comes. And you're trying to find solid data points and solid information that can really kind of help the entire field.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing is, it needs to be cheap. It needs to be quick. It needs to be repeatable, valid. And, that was the thing when I was talking to Dr. Tabor. He was talking about how he uses a stoplight system with his athletes as far as managing volume for the day. And I've been using it with tactical population. It works pretty well. So what we'll do is we'll just bring out the just jump mats and we just establish a stoplight system. So we have them do 3 max effort jumps on a just jump mat. So if they set a PR on the jump, then we will, hey, we're going to chase weight. We're going to get after it a little bit, like screw the sets and all that. We might take extras. If they have a 5 to 10% drop off, it's, whatever we prescribed. And that'd be a yellow day. And then if it's greater than a 10% drop off, okay, cool. We're going to drop off 2 sets and maybe add a couple reps so you can work on your technique. So that way throughout the week, and that's assuming that they're putting forth their best effort into those max effort jumps so that they're not like dogging it so they can, max on the stuff they want to max on. But that's worked pretty well. So this would be a quick way where we can use the just jump, and then I just need to look into the cheek swab stuff. And there's some logistical things to figure out. But yeah, I mean, I'm already reading a ton anyway every day when I get done training guys, and I was like, you know what? If this is here for the funding, why don't I just do what I want to do, and then I'm still reading. I'm just going to do what I'm wanting, and then I'll have some extra letters that make some arguments a little bit easier later on down the road.
That's awesome. And that's exactly what you point out too is like, right now I'm reading books I'm going for the starting strength certification in a couple weeks, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
we've been reading a lot of these books by Mark Ripito, and it's like I remember the process, of learning before it was arduous. I didn't really enjoy it because I just thought I didn't like going to school, but then it also turns out that
Yeah.
when I was 18 through 22, 23, when I finished my master's degree, I was also figuring out how to live life and pay bills and do all this extra stuff. And then starting to be a GA. And it was like, yeah, no wonder I didn't really love reading and
Yeah.
dedicating my time to this because I didn't really have the time to do it. But now, as I go through this process, it's kind of reinvigorating my love for continuing education, which is a really cool process for me. And then for you to be able to target it to something very specific that you want to do and that can make a change within the field, I'm sure has got to be a really fun process.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's in theory it sounds like a fun process right now, but like I'm sh- I'm probably like too stupid to realize how much work I just imposed on myself, and I'm like, oh man, this is a mistake. But we'll
well
see.
then
I honestly though, I think it'll be
well then we'll film another episode in about 4 years, and then we'll see
Yeah, it's
exactly
gonna be
how that
like gray hair everywhere and like
process.
just like dim lighting in here and stuff.
It's like, when's the last time you ate? Are you okay?
Ah,
Oh,
I'm in a small shirt now.
I'm on I'm on the red. I'm on the red of the stoplight. But exactly what you mentioned too on that piece, it does have to be quick. And it's interesting when you talk about kind of a readiness deal and you brought up all the factors of what would make it appealing for somebody like myself to use, right? Because I do feel like sometimes people will kind of propose new ideas, or they'll say, hey, this would be really good for your program. And it's like, well, dude, I've got 15 minutes for this lift specifically today, and it's a tough
Hmm.
process to go. I'm just curious from a time standpoint for your stoplight process, how long does that actually take you?
So we just line out 3 mats, and it just gives us a quick read, and it probably takes less than 10 minutes. So because it's jump max height, and then you recycle to the back of the line. So myself and two other coaches are just looking at those numbers, spitting them out, and then the only one we want people to remember is their peak number. So they all know what their PR is, and then if they PR, then we just, all right, cool. Greens do this, yellows do this, reds do this. Um, but that's the other thing. The other luxury of the tactical setting versus the collegiate is we have as much time as we want. Um, like I know collegiate's very limited for a lot of reasons, but for us, I mean, we're given 90 minutes per day. So we can, if I need more time, I can just call the cadre or the admin and be like, hey, can we get an extra an hour? Which I never do that, but I mean, like I could. So,
I mean, that's a really nice piece of it, right? Because sometimes our, I know we've got basketball practice coming up, and it's supposed to start at 1, but I know our guys really have to be out of the weight room by 12:40 to make sure they can get their shots up and do everything ahead of time. But 10 minutes is still really, I mean, that's really not that much out of the time slot that you have allotted. Also kind of serves as a little bit as a warm up as well.
mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a really cool piece. Do you use velocity based training with this? Because I know that's kind of what other people will use to kind of auto regulate any other technologies, or is it really just that stoplight system and then kind of roll from there?
Just the stoplight right now. And it's not because I don't think that the VBT is useful, because I believe that it absolutely is. We used to use it at Ball State with Tendo units. And, I think Coach Robe will still use this at times, but it's basically, a couple things you could say, well, you can use whatever weight you want as long as you stay within this velocity, and then you might put something in to say, kind of like a stopgap where you say, all right, well, if it drops greater than, below this velocity range 2 sets in a row, you're done. So then you might have people doing, some might have a capacity to do 3 sets, others might have a capacity to do 15 sets. But the big reason we don't use it right now is, number one, the lack of funding. Number two is going to be, so many of these folks are just amateur lifters. They've never been taught how to properly squat, how to move. So I don't want to take away from their technique in the early phases by getting them to chase after a speed, because then they would be out of position because they're just looking at the number. Um, I think it absolutely has its place. If I had these guys for a couple years, like freshman, sophomore years, maybe we start out and we're going to learn how to move, and then juniors, seniors are going to use VBT because they've earned it. Um, so,
I've seen that kind of breakdown with myself even while using VBT. Like
yeah.
I like you said, I chase those numbers, and then all of a sudden, as somebody who's been lifting for 15 plus years at this point. I'm starting to kind of break down my technique because I'm just trying to push that bar as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So that process makes sense. Um, overall, this has been really interesting for me because I love hearing about your different processes, and I can tell you're a cerebral guy, in the way that you think and the way you listen, versus somebody you talk about that being the Midwest style. I'm from the Northeast, so it's just talk as loud as possible and as fast as possible, and then just hope somebody's listening. I've really enjoyed this process. I'm sure others, especially within the tactical field, might want to reach out and have any questions for you. If somebody does want to reach out, what would be the best way to do it? Instagram or email, anything like that?
Yeah, so anybody can email me, Travis at dhpcoaching.net. Instagram, I think, is just Coach Travis Barrett, or okay, you've got to be kidding me. Got to be kidding me. Oh my gosh. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Sorry, man.
No worries at all. Seriously.
All right. So,
Uh,
the
yeah, we can
Instagram
start
is
right from that. Sorry.
okay. So Instagram is yeah. Instagram's Coach Travis Barrett. I've got the other Instagram account. I think it's Dynamic HPT. So that's for Dynamic Human Performance. But yeah, just those places. I can't remember my YouTube is like Dynamic HP or something like that. So
Do you post on
anywhere.
YouTube still?
I think I'm on YouTube somewhere. I don't know. Like you can find some stuff on me on there, but
I'll have athletes kind of come back and they're like, "Yeah, I followed you on YouTube or something." I'm like, "Oh my, I don't even remember what I posted," and it's like literally just like a demo for a single leg RDL, like from 4 years
because
ago, and I'm like, "All
I've got this. I finally got a little magnet put on the back of my phone here, and I just have these like rants I need to get off my chest before I get home. So I just
right."
record myself and then like post it on my YouTube channel. I'm like, I don't know who the hell's watching this thing, but more power to you, man.
No, that's awesome. Somebody told me specifically the other day they were listening to another video that I made, and I was like, "Man, I appreciate it. You literally doubled my listening base by just being
I
yourself
listen to
and listening
myself
to."
and you.
Yeah, you. It's two of us now. What'd you think? Well, Travis, thank you so much for coming on, man. I've really enjoyed it, and I wish you the best of luck in your PhD. Like I said, we'll circle back in 4 years and we'll see how you're doing.
See how I'm doing. All right. Well, thanks again for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. Have a good one.